Hello, and welcome to Inventors Helping Inventors. I'm your host, Alan Beckley, inventor of the Wonder Wallet. If you're an inventor searching for proven ways to make money with your invention, if you dream to see your product selling in stores everywhere, you've come to the right place. There's no better place to get help than from experts, inventors who've already achieved success. Every week, I interview successful inventors, asking them the questions you want to know. Tune in to learn from the experts so you can get your invention out of the tank and into the bank.
I switched gears, got out of advertising, got into branding, quickly made a name for myself. I named the Wendy's Baconator. I did it as a freelancer for another firm, and that really gave me a taste of what could happen when I put my creativity to good use. And it's been about 20 years now.
What if you could reclaim 20 hours per week that you're currently losing to tedious research, software wrestling, and endless Google searches? I'm launching a completely new workshop for inventors to help you do just that. How to use AI as your powerful, free employee. This founding member program happens soon, Tuesday, June 24th, and enrollment is limited to only 15 inventors. I kicked it off yesterday, and we already have 2 commitments. So once the class is full, enrollment will be closed. But I wanted to give you the chance to join us in this workshop that's happening very soon. All the details are at www.alanbeckley.com/AI. Catchy name, huh? Join the workshop, and here is what you'll master. AI research mastery. Get precise answers in seconds instead of hours of Google or YouTube hunting. Instant problem solving. Let AI troubleshoot your software and app challenges. Creative amplification. Use AI to enhance your inventing process, not replace it. And finally, time freedom. Reclaim your most valuable resource, time for actually creating. Here are all the details. When? Tuesday, June 24th at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Your investment? Only $97. Far below what this will cost later. Exclusive access, a maximum of only 15 inventors. Bonus, attend the workshop live and you'll get 1 hour of one-on-one coaching from me for free. I want to stress, this is a $150 value you get for free just for attending the workshop. Register now. Just go to alanbeckley.com/AI while space is still available. Ready to have some fun? Learn how to put AI to work to save you tons of time and lots of money. Don't wait until the class is full. Join us now. alanbeckley.com/AI. I look forward to meeting you on Tuesday, June 24th. Welcome to episode number 518. Today is a rebroadcast of one of our classic favorites, episode number 354, way back to November 13th of 2023, with product naming guru Alexandra Watkins. One of the products she named was the Baconator by Wendy's. You'll learn great tips for naming and branding. I think you're going to enjoy this episode as much as I did. Alexandra Watkins is a leading and outspoken authority on brand names with a buzz. For nearly 20 years, she and her naming firm, Eat My Words, have created love at first sight brand names for countless companies, including Amazon, Coca-Cola, Disney, Twitter, and Google. Her breakthrough creativity book, Hello, My Name is Awesome: How to Create Brand Names That Stick, was named a top 10 marketing book by Inc. magazine. Her personal name hall of fame includes Wendy's Baconator, Nito Robotic Vacuum, Burger King's Mac and Cheetos, Spanish language school Gringo Lingo, and frozen yogurt franchise Spoon Me. The vertical farming company she named Plenty was recently named one of the top 100 most influential companies by Time magazine. She helps both Fortune 100 companies as well as small companies, including Inventors, with creating clever product names that are memorable. You'll want to listen to this entire interview where Alexandra shares how she was able to get a job with an advertising agency with no college education. Also, why Kryptonite is an ingenious name for a bicycle lock company. And finally, why it is not essential to secure a domain name that is an exact match to your product name. Now let's get right to our interview with Alexandra Watkins. Alexandra Watkins, it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast with us today.
Alan, thank you so much for having me. It's so exciting to meet the inventor of Wonder Wallet.
Thank you for that. I do appreciate that. For our listeners, I want to mention that, Alexandra, you're not an inventor. You are a product naming expert. And I invited you to be on the podcast to share your expertise in naming, something that inventors typically know little about and struggle with, to be honest. I'm excited for you to share with our listeners your approach to clever, memorable product names and why naming is important for inventors.
I'm glad to do it. And I think that the names that I like best are inventive names. So I think that your audience will relate.
Yeah, that sounds great. As we kick off, can you share a bit about your background with our listeners, like where you grew up and went to school, and also what sparked your interest in making a career out of product naming?
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in San Diego, California, which is where I live right now. I ran away from home for 33 years after high school. Went and made a name for myself, mainly in San Francisco, but I'm back. And my background is unusual. When I was in eighth grade, I discovered that I wanted to be in advertising. So I convinced my parents that I didn't need to go to college. I didn't want to go to college. I just wanted to start working. So they reluctantly agreed. I was able to talk my way into working at some ad agencies. And eventually I discovered naming, which I'm sure, like a lot of your listeners, I had no idea that naming was actually a profession. And when I discovered that, I switched gears, got out of advertising, got into branding, quickly made a name for myself. I named the Wendy's Baconator. I did it as a freelancer for another firm. And that really gave me a taste of what could happen when I put my creativity to good use. And it's been about 20 years now.
That's an amazing story, and I appreciate you sharing that. And especially as you're describing San Diego is such a delightful place. Been there a couple of times, and the weather and everything's so wonderful. So you escaped from San Francisco for being there for a while, if I understood that.
Yes, I got out before the doom loop was just starting to spin. And that was almost 6 years ago. And I looked back at my house that I sold, and the value has gone down, and the value of the house in San Diego has gone up. So it was a wise move.
Sounds like it was. And I also want to just highlight for our listeners, first of all, like inventors listening to our podcast, you are clearly a very creative person. And I want to highlight for the listeners, it's not exactly a small achievement working your way into an ad agency without a college education, et cetera. So clearly you already had a bent for being influential or getting people to see your view from things. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I have always used my creativity when I've had a challenge, like, how am I going to get a job without a college education? I've always used my creativity to get to open doors and get whatever my heart desires.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And as you've alluded to, you've helped Fortune 100 companies such as Amazon and Coca-Cola with product naming. And my listeners, are, as we mentioned, are all inventors and small business owners. I'd like to ask, is the approach towards product naming for a small company similar, or is it very different from that of a large company?
It's different in only better ways. So when you're working with a big company like a Coca-Cola or Frito-Lay or a lot of these big consumer packaged goods brands that we name products for, they are investing millions of dollars into new products. So they test everything. So sometimes our names never see the light of day because the products never see the light of day because consumers, there's not enough interest. Whereas when we work with small businesses or we work with inventors, they are so passionate about getting their product to market that it always gets to market. And they're not doing focus groups on their name, and focus groups notoriously kill good names. But with inventors, they're not doing that. They're hopefully going through a somewhat formal process to get a name, or at least running it through a test to make sure it's a good name. And I have one of those, by the way. But yeah, no, we like working with large businesses because that's what pays the bills. But we love working with small businesses, especially if they want a fun, clever, or really creative name.
Thanks for sharing that. And I like that you brought something up, a point that I would have never thought of. And as you were describing it, the more I pondered it, the more it made a certain amount of sense. And you said that focus groups are notorious for killing good names. Do you think that might be because people tend to, I wouldn't quite call it groupthink, but they tend to look at names and things based upon history and whatever they've always thought was the way things would be done. And they're not so open perhaps to new, innovative ways to look at it. But what are your thoughts behind why focus groups often kill good names?
Absolutely, Alan. You totally hit the nail on the head. Those are all reasons why focus groups kill names. People want something familiar. And if something is unfamiliar, it's quick to be rejected. Or they are taking the name out of context. So, for instance, there's the global beauty brand called The Body Shop. And I could just imagine if they focus group that name, that women would have said, the body shop. That's like my greasy mechanic who hasn't changed the magazines in his waiting room for 25 years. Like people have these reactions that aren't based in reality. It's just based in their own reality. So what happens is when you ask people, and this, you don't, it's not even a formal focus group. If you are surveying your friends and family, what do you think of this name? When people hear, what do you think of this name? What they're hearing is, what don't you like about this name? Because suddenly everybody considers themselves to be an expert at brand names. And they're not. They're just giving you their personal reaction to it. And the best question to ask, is it right for the brand? Because that's very objective versus what do you think of it, which is very subjective.
Now, I like that too. That what do you think of fill in the blank, whether it's a name or a brand, or for that matter, an invention, does invite your psychological thinking to say, what critiques do you have of it? What do you not
Yes.
like of it? And what you're wanting to hear is, how do you like it? And you're going to get, how do you not like it?
Yeah. So that's the reason why I invented this name evaluation test so people would have an objective way to evaluate names.
Do we have access to your name evaluation test?
Yes, it's on our website. So if you go to eatmywords.com, just click on test a name. You'll see it right at the top. And that will walk you through our 12-point name evaluation process, which is called the Smile and Scratch test.
Fantastic. And so it's eatmywords.com and evaluate a name.
Test a name.
Oh, test a name. Okay, great. Yeah, because I'm sure our listeners are going to like to test that out. So that's fantastic. Now, my next question for you is, what are the qualities of a strong name and a strong brand name? And also, what are the biggest mistakes that people make when naming a product? Can you share your thoughts on that?
Sure. So the 5 qualities that make a name really strong are so I mentioned the smile and scratch test. Smile is an acronym for the 5 qualities that make a name great. Scratch is an acronym for the 7 deal breakers and when you need to scratch it off the list. So what makes a name very strong is the S stands for suggestive. You want your name to suggest something about what your product is or does. Don't make people guess. And I think inventors are good at that. You want your name to be memorable. That's the M in smile. What makes something memorable is if it exists in our current knowledge base. So an example is, I think most of us know the bike lock company named Kryptonite. We all know kryptonite from Superman. That's in our existing knowledge base. And we know that kryptonite repels Superman. Therefore, metaphorically, kryptonite bike locks are going to repel bike thieves. So that's a memorable name. Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay. And then the I in smile stands for imagery. You want people to, when they hear your name or see your name, you want it to conjure up an image in their mind. People remember pictures much more easily than they remember random words or letters. So this is also something that aids in memory. So back to kryptonite, right? I say kryptonite, you can picture Superman powering facing kryptonite. So that's an example. And then the L in smile stands for legs. And legs is it's the hardest thing to get, but it's the best thing to have. And legs simply means that your name lends itself to a theme. So I'll give you an example. We'll use Eat My Words, the name of my own company. So our blog is called The Kitchen Sink. We have a menu of services. We just introduced a new service, a new package called Fun Size, like the Halloween candy. So you can see we have a lot of fun with our theme. We named a PR firm Fire Talker PR, and the woman calls herself the fire chief. She works in the firehouse, and her theme song is Fire by the Ohio Players. So if you have a theme, you can really extend your brand. And lastly, the E in smile, and this is really important, stands for emotional connection. Your name needs to resonate with your target audience, or else it's going to go right over their head.
I like that so much. There's so many great points for our listeners on the SMILE. The one I wanted to comment most about was the legs, one of the harder ones, building it around a theme. And when you use the fire theme, what I can refer back to is podcaster and entrepreneur John Lee Dumas, who calls himself JLD, and his podcast is Entrepreneurs on Fire, which he calls for short EOF. And he always says, ignite. When he kicks off the podcast, he says, so keep doing what you're doing and ignite. And so he builds a lot of things around that whole fire image, like you were talking about.
Yeah, I love that.
So anyway, I like that a lot. And that's really helpful, and especially the test a name. What are some of the most common product naming misconceptions that you see people have? And do you have any suggestions or tips to our listeners, besides what you already mentioned with Smile? But do you have any suggestions or tips for our listeners for creating their own product names that are clever and memorable?
Sure. Okay, let me tell you the biggest misconception is that you have to own an exact match domain name. You absolutely do not. Nobody expects you to. And if you're inventing a product, you're a product company. You're not an online business. Even if you sell your product online, that's okay. You add a modifier word. So it could be a verb, drink Coca-Cola, right? Enjoy Coca-Cola, for instance. Or you could add a word at the end. Or you could be really clever. I'll give you a couple clever examples. We named a gourmet popcorn store Pop Psychology. And psychology, we couldn't get the domain name. Also, psychology is really hard to spell for some people, me. So we used the tagline instead. And this name had great legs. And the tagline and domain name was crazy for popcorn. So it doesn't have pop psychology in the domain name, but it helps reinforce the name and it makes people smile. And another one that I love is it's a smoked turkey company called Greenberg Smoked Turkeys. Family name, Greenberg could be spelled a couple different ways, but their domain name is unforgettable. And you might even find yourself talking about it this Thanksgiving, and it's gobblegobble.com.
That's amazing. I like gobble.com. Very unforgettable. And it gets right to the point of what it's all about. Yeah. And I also like the crazy for popcorn and all of the ideas that, again, more and more about creating things that are memorable and back the idea of creating when you can imagery, things like that. The other thing you did hit on, you said like psychology is a word that a lot of people might have trouble spelling. And so sometimes avoiding or swapping out a different word could be a reason for that. Because when I was looking at naming my product, which again, I didn't come up with a great name for it, full disclosure, but at one point I wanted to use the word elite as part of the product name. And I thought, wait a minute, it's spelled ELITE. Not everybody knows how to spell elite. That may be not as common a word amongst the entire population. And a foreign language speaker, somebody who's not an English speaker, might not get it. So in my opinion, trying to create a broader spectrum that somebody who's from another country or different language might still semi-naturally be able to pronounce. Do you ever think or do things like that play when you're doing your naming?
Yes, the foreign language translations, that's something that we outsource that to a company that will look into that for us. They have linguists in every country that they use to make sure that nothing means something untoward in another language or that pronunciation isn't difficult for them. But for the most part, people want something for English speaking audiences. So we don't have to do that very often. But I will say it's important that your name is pronounced one way. And the reason why is I'll give you an example. There's a green protein company and it's spelled VEGA. That can be pronounced Vega, like vegetarian. Okay, Vega, like vegan, or Vega, like the car from the 70s. And if three different people are talking about this product, one's calling it Vega, one's calling it Vega, and one's calling it Vega, you would have no idea they were talking about the same company. So that's why it's really important that your name is only pronounced one way because you do not want to dilute your brand.
That's such an excellent point. I really like that really well. And one last point I was just going to make regarding the foreign language connection or what have you. And I'm sure you've heard this. It's a urban legend, but I'm pretty sure it's true. Famously, the Chevy Nova was a very popular car in America for many years. And they thought, let's sell it in Latin America. Of course, in Spanish, Nova means doesn't go. So the Chevy Nova, I don't want to buy a car that does not go. So I think they ended up renaming it for sales in Latin America, for example.
Alan, guess what? That story is not true.
Oh, it's not a true story?
No, all of the namers know the legend of the Chevy Nova. So, yes, there's a great blog post about it, by the way. So, the Chevy Nova, so saying Nova means won't go, was a reporter joked about that. It would be like when we say Fiat stands for fix it again, Tony. It was that same doing it in jest like that. So, I'll give you an example. If there was a furniture company named Notable, right? Notable. And you said notable, that's no table. You would never think notable is no table, but it is those words if you dissect it. So, yeah, the story that is told is that the car was named something else, and that's not true either. The car name that they came up with was the Volkswagen brand that was introduced down in Latin America. But yeah, people say that if there's a gas station, like a well-known gas station in Mexico called Nova, no, don't put this gas in your car because it won't go. Yeah, unfortunately, that is a story that's been told again and again.
Thanks for debunking that. I did say it might be an urban legend, which of course
Yeah.
turns out it is an urban legend and not true.
Yeah, but there's definitely examples of names like that did mean something untoward. And I would recommend to everybody before you launch your brand name, look on the Urban Dictionary and just make sure that it doesn't mean anything bad in a foreign language.
As we roll towards a close, I would like to ask you, are there any parting words that you'd like to leave us with?
Yeah, I just encourage people like be as creative as your inventions. I know that people put their heart and soul and a lot of money into launching their product. So you want a name that's reflective. You spend all that time creating your product, invest some time in naming it something that people will remember and appreciate. And I wrote a whole book, Hello, My Name is Awesome, How to Create Brand Names That Stick. And you can get a lot of tips and advice in that book.
And where can they get the book?
On Amazon. Yeah, 744 reviews on Amazon.
Wow, that's great. My last question then for you is how can our listeners reach you if they have other questions?
You can email me, Alexandra at eatmywords.com. Reach out to me on LinkedIn, same name. And yeah, go to our website, go to eatmywords.com. If you just want inspiration, go to eatmywords.com and look at our portfolio, and you will be inspired by seeing a lot of really cool names. One of my favorites, I'll tell you two quick inventions. One, a GPS for dogs that we name Retriever. And another is the robotic vacuum that I named Nito.
Alexandra, just really want to thank you for being on the podcast with us today and to sharing your experience and your knowledge around creating names and name brands for products and some of the gotchas people fall into and such good tips such as focus groups kill good names. You can imagine somebody spending a lot of money for a focus group only to have their best name killed. So thank you for sharing that with us. And maybe another 6 months or a year, I might touch bases with you again and have you on the podcast to see how things are going for you at that time.
Would love to come back.
You bet. Thanks again for being on the podcast.
Thank you, Alan.
Thanks so much for tuning in to Inventors Helping Inventors. If you like the show, please tell your friends about it. Make sure to subscribe in iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts so you won't miss a single episode. Talk to you soon.